Welcome to the BJJ Mental Coach Podcast, episode 147. I'm your host, Gustavo Dantas, and today we talk with Jake Watson. So, Jake is a black belt in Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu under Andre Maracaba, a junior Golden Gloves boxing champion, and a three-time amateur Muay Thai national champion. He's 26 and he has competed at the highest level of BJJ, being ranked number 5 in the 88 kilos division on the FloGrappling worldwide black belt rankings. As a broadcaster, Jake has actively worked as a play-by-play caller commentator, on-air host, ring announcer, and interviewer for over 40 different shows in the past 3 years. So if you've been following the jiu-jitsu competition scene, most likely you've heard or seen Jake working IBJJF, FloGrappling, UFC Fight Pass. So he's going everywhere. So it's really cool to see this new phase of his career. For people who don't know, maybe you're listening for the first time, but you don't know anything about me. But I'm in Arizona. I have a school here in Tempe, and I've been event promoter since 1998, tournament promoter. And in Arizona since 2000, 2001. And Jake Watson, he is from Arizona, and he competed in all the belts since he was a kid. So he's part of this generation in Arizona, very few that competed all kids belts in including high level. So it's awesome. Now, during the interview, I asked him at one point what inspired him to pursue the commentator, announcer route. And his answer inspired me to title the episode, Let Your Irritations Inspire You. So if you're listening to the podcast in the audio version, Spotify or whatever else, after the interview, I share my final thoughts and basically explain, why I titled this, Let Your Irritations Inspire You, okay? Before we get to the interview, a couple episodes ago, I mentioned how I was getting back to training. Quick shout out to New Hope Regeneration for the stem cell treatment that really helped me. So I got to compete at the IBJJF New Jersey International Open. Supposedly it was a couple weeks ago. Supposedly it was the biggest open to date, apparently. 2,400 competitors, 2 days, 14 mats. And I won my division. I had 2 matches, Master 4 lightweight. Next year, I'm upgrading to Master 5. That'll be interesting. And yeah, so the Friday, the night before, I had the opportunity to teach a mental skills training seminar at Vitor Shaolin's school. He's a good friend of mine. I have done a seminar in his New York location years ago. So I love when I do a seminar, especially the information is so fresh and there's a tournament next day. Or so if I'm there, it's cool that I can hear the feedback, or sometimes people can send me a message just saying how the information helped in some way. And that's the idea that, we try and I tell them, if there's one concept, one thing that you're able to implement and help your performance, man, the investment's ready. At your time that you just hear seeding information, you're getting information, it's worth it. It's the same thing with a book. Sometimes you don't remember the whole book, but there's one page that made an impact. So meaning it was worth it. Now, we talked about mindset before, doing after. So after the tournament is very important because we're talking about tournament analysis, winning or losing. And I had to do the same thing when reevaluating my performance. So when you reevaluate your performance, I don't know if you do have the habit of, actually analyzing or not. You should, because it can really help you. You look into 4 key elements. We have the technical, we got the strategic, we got the physical, and we got the mental. So you think about the 4 pillars, you want to try to get them as balanced as possible. Sometimes one is doing better than the other, but our goal is try to raise all of them as even as possible, right? So when you do that, you need to ask yourself 2 questions. One is, what did you do right? And the second one, take responsibility to say, what could you have done differently? And I'm not talking about just the tournament, I'm talking about preparation as well. From there, taking responsibility, analyze, you might be able to make some adjustments. So if you don't have the habit of doing, make sure you do so, because it helps you pinpoint and okay, and even talk with your coach, with the instructors, see hey, I felt that I need more work with this or that. So the 4 key aspects, super important. So if you haven't done it, I highly suggest. Before we get to the interview real quick, don't forget to check out at Jiu-Jitsu Tribe on Instagram and YouTube, jujitsutribe.org, the nonprofit organization we started in 2010 with the mission of inspire, impacting, and improving lives, utilizing jiu-jitsu as a personal and social development tool in impoverished communities. So we support social projects that offer free jiu-jitsu classes worldwide. There are not too many programs in the US who, as far as we know, whatever's out there, we have been able to help in some way. And if you are aware of a program in the United States that offer a nonprofit classes, just let us know. Send me a message at Gustavo Dantas BJJ on Instagram, and maybe you can reach out and help some way. I was teaching a seminar in Kansas City last year, and someone told me like, hey, one of my friends does here in Kansas City, one community. And I was like, great, give him his information next day, reach out, we talk. He actually I interviewed him, I believe, last year. And we were able to raise some funds to get gis for the students that can afford. So it's pretty cool. So if you know anything, let me know. Now stay with the interview with Jake Watson and stick around for the final thoughts if you listen to the audio version. And I see you all soon. Oos. Jake, welcome to the podcast.
Man, thank you for having me. I'm excited to be here. I looked forward to it ever since you told me you wanted me to have me as a guest. I've been in the jiu-jitsu community here in Arizona for a very long time, and I've always looked up to you, especially with all the tournament. You've given me so many opportunities to compete in my youth, and now, still going on here at the Arizona Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu League. So the honor is all mine.
Beautiful. We're going to talk about, the early days of your martial arts journey, but let's just talk a little bit right now. What's going on? You've been traveling a lot of wonderful opportunities for you. So how's the journey going on?
Yeah, it's been incredible. So I kind of took a pivot about 3 years ago and became a full-time, well, actually now I'm about close to full-time combat sports commentator. And I started out in the world of jiu-jitsu. So I was given an opportunity to commentate Worlds one year, and now I've been doing that ever since. And it's been all over the world. I just got back from Sao Paulo, where it was the AIGA Champions League qualifier there. Come back home. The next week is Worlds. Week after that is an MMA show called Lights Out Extreme Fighting with Sean Merriman. Now I'm commentating MMA. I actually have something coming up very big that I'm actually not allowed to say. That feels like a privilege to be able to say that sentence. I'm not allowed to tell you yet. I will absolutely tell you, Gustavo. I'll send you a message whenever I am allowed to say so. But it's just been constant travel, constant, it's almost like competition again, in a sense that the industry is very competitive. And so I've been traveling almost every weekend, just commentating some of the biggest shows and some shows that I'm new to. But all in all, it's been an amazing experience.
Yeah, just tell me real quick about your journey to Brazil, the last trip you did. I don't know much about the organization, so just tell me a little bit about it.
So AIGA is an organization that is actually based in Kazakhstan, and it's run by Toligan Kumarov, who is he loves jiu-jitsu. This guy's amazing, and there's a whole team, a very small but very dedicated team of people who run this organization. And essentially, what it is it's teams of 7. So you have, let's say the lowest weight division's under 60. It'll go up in increments of 6 kilograms all the way up to above 91 kilograms. 7v7 teams in a tournament. Day 1 is the first round. Day 2 is the semifinal and the final. And it's like best of 7. And it's really, really exciting because you get to see some really cool matchups. You get to see some great competitors. I mean, Team Kasai was the winning team down there. It had Roberto Jimenez, Pedro Mourinho, William Tackett, Andrew Tackett. It was absolutely rife with some of the, most notable competitors down here in the United States. My journey to Brazil it's really fun. I've been to Brazil once, and I competed in Rio de Janeiro. And actually, no, I didn't compete there. I stopped there, and I still competed in Sao Paulo because it was a 2013 Brasileiros. And when I went to Sao Paulo, first thing that I wanted to do was I wanted to speak as much Portuguese as I could, because I'm learning the language, and I want to learn Portuguese so bad. So I'm trying to speak Portuguese to people on the flight, and it doesn't work out because it's awkward. And they're like, man, we were just here in America. Why are you doing this? And I had to fly to Montreal first, which was super weird because I went from Arizona all the way up to Canada and then back down to Brazil. That was strange. But I had an opportunity to just, I mean, Victor Doria from Fight Sports met me in the airport. He navigated me, told me what to do. I didn't know you had to get a Uber Black. That was like what you do in Brazil. I didn't know that. I would have just got an Uber and I would have been one of those guys that maybe, maybe got put in a rough situation. Who knows? But the whole trip was awesome because Aika does this amazing thing where they do everything they can to take care of every athlete and every media person to a T. Now they don't always have the availability to do so, but they organize the transportation, they organize the hotel room, they organize the food even so that you can just kind of focus on your job. You don't have to focus on the other stuff, focus on your job. And I will say, I met some really amazing people in Brazil. I made some friends in Brazil. I actually got the opportunity to go to church as well on Sunday it was Cidade Cinco in São Paulo. It's a Igreja Reformada Missional. And that was just the way that they were so cool there with like an American being there. And they're like, dude, yeah, come on. Like tell us what church is like in America. Like really, really cool opportunities like that. Every single moment was just me being able to share, almost like feeling like, man, I want to live in Brazil for a couple months and really get to know the country and the people. It was a super fun time. And what's funny is I haven't even talked about the event yet, but just Brazil was a lot of fun. And the event went smoothly, Acai Republic was the partner of the event, and Juliano Prado was heavily involved with the production and everything like that. And there were some hiccups here and there, as there are with any show. Mm-hmm. You know that better than probably most people, that there are hiccup after hiccup as a possibility with a show. But overall, it went awesome. There was so many great matches. Aiga, people go out there and they fight really, really hard. I think they really appreciate the way that they're taken care of. And now they have their opportunity. The winning team gets to go to Kazakhstan and compete for the chance at $500,000. That is split between 7 people. It's not a bad payday, and they're definitely Team Kasai is capable.
And not getting punched in the face. That's incredible.
Oh yeah. That's a big plus, especially when you see a lot of the jiu-jitsu athletes who make the transition to MMA. That is something that is like, I mean, we've seen it equalize people. I mean, Andre Maracaba was one of the best ever, right? And he did MMA. And no disrespect to Andre Maracaba, but like that is just what can happen. I mean, he has been knocked out. I think it was by Tyron Woodley. And that's, it's MMA is this weird thing where, I mean, we saw Rodolfo Vieira get submitted by a purple belt because it was the MMA ring. It's different. It's not the same jiu-jitsu. It feels like there's different rules almost. And I would love to hear your thoughts on that. And I don't know if you agree, but I feel like MMA or jiu-jitsu in MMA, you have to be able to transition. We saw that's why we saw Damian Maia, absolutely. Charles Oliveira. They transitioned the jiu-jitsu mentality to MMA so fluidly. And then it looks like this superpower, because I really think it is. I think jiu-jitsu is the best martial art, but you have to be willing to adjust at the same time. And so that's what I feel.
And one of the things that people don't realize, I mean, new people that got involved with jiu-jitsu and NCE MMA, man, I was with Vitor Shaolin this weekend. For people don't know, 3-time world champion. He was the Shooto champion in Japan, cage rate champion, my jiu-jitsu idol, training partner and jiu-jitsu idol. He was a 3-time jiu-jitsu world champion, but back in early 2000s. And then it's like, now what? It's not like you had like a bunch of seminars and associations or whatever. It was like, you have to go to MMA. You have no other, you want to make money, you have to go. So a lot of that crowd. So nowadays, that is such a different world that you don't have to go to MMA. You can actually, if you're smart and have an entrepreneurial mindset too, of course, and you're a high level competitor, you can definitely make it up. Even if you're not a high level competitor, you can make a living having a school and so forth. But the difference now, the opportunities, like you said, 500 grand for like 7 guys and you don't get punched in the face. That's incredible. So a lot of people don't know that, a lot of the stuff that, people that paved the way for what it is right now, it's incredible. I remember Pejipano talking about him. For people who don't know, Pejipano, Marcio Cruz, he's a 2-time absolute champion black belt. And he's like, man, I was I won the worlds. Yeah, I'm a two-time absolute champion. I don't have money to pay my rent. You know what I
Mhm.
mean? It was like, so the same thing. He migrated to MMA.
Yeah.
And so nowadays, it's definitely, man, so much better. So many opportunities and so many shows. And it's cool that open doors for so many, like for you. Like now it's
Mhm.
another way for you. Now you uh taking advantage of like, man, going there, travel, see and be a part of this growth. It's incredible.
It really does feel like we're on the ground floor of something truly special. And
Mm-hmm.
there are some people I think who are very attached to the traditional rigid way where they even disagree with cash prize tournaments. And it's like, man, why? Because I think that while the driving force behind the growth of jiu-jitsu, I will say, is not necessarily the athlete. It's the gyms and the students, because an athlete was a student first. And so it has to be students. It just makes sense. Now, for the sport to continue to grow, I love the inclusion of cash prizes, treating the athletes more like athletes. A rising tide really does raise all ships. I'm working for ADCC, and so I'm in this interesting spot where not working for them as an employee, but I'm contracted to be the play-by-play commentator for ADCC Worlds 2024. So I'm in this interesting spot where people ask me, what do I think about the Craig Jones Invitational or the ADCC one, right? But the reality is, whatever is going to drive more growth for these opportunities, because I don't want jiu-jitsu athletes to have to go to MMA, feel like they have to abandon the thing they're truly passionate about, or you know what I mean? Like go to something that they're maybe not as passionate about because they feel like they need to make a living. They need to continue to make the money. That's not the case anymore. And I think it's awesome. A lot of these athletes, I mean, Victor Hugo talked about it a little bit as well. He said, man, I won worlds. I don't know how many times world champion Victor Hugo is, and he was still having to make food deliveries.
Mm-hmm.
And wow, like, and he's a gym owner too. It's just like not a gym owner, but I know he's a teacher. And so I do hope that there are more opportunities like that. And you see other organizations getting involved and getting more creative as well. It's really cool to see like PGF World on UFC Fight Pass, ran by Brandon McCatherine. He's a 10th Planet Black Belt, and he's immensely passionate about jiu-jitsu. He loves jiu-jitsu. And he is forming like, okay, we have teams. There's kind of like teams, and there's a season of jiu-jitsu, and there's like a Super Bowl of that season. That's one idea. Then you have AIGA, team-based jiu-jitsu, 7v7. That's another idea. You got Quintet. You got the IBJJF, which is still king, still the biggest organization in the entire world, and it's still doing its lane as well, which is still good for athletes as well. All of these organizations, eventually, I think they do need to kind of come together in a way, because I mean, there's one NFL, right? There's one UFC, and every other competitor to the UFC is nowhere even close. It's just so far below that the UFC almost laughs at them. Jiu-jitsu eventually will do this thing where it's so wide, and then it'll start to get deep. Right now it's really wide, it's really fat, but it'll get deep eventually. And that's when I think we're going to see it turn into more of a mainstream sport. It's more mainstream as a practice, I think, right now. You hear everybody talking about it. Joe Rogan's the biggest podcast in the world, and he's talking
Mm-hmm.
about jiu-jitsu all the time. But I do think eventually the sport will get more mainstream once we can agree on a rule set. you know?
Yeah, that's definitely always going to be
Mm-hmm.
a challenge. We're not going to be able to really make everyone happy.
Yeah, no.
But yeah, I sometimes people talk about jujitsu in the Olympics,
Mm-hmm.
and I always mixed feelings about it. I personally don't see gi jujitsu. I can see no gi,
Mm-hmm.
just because you can get so many more practitioners or people transition from wrestling, and because you need to have a minimum that many federations around the world and all that
Yes.
kind of stuff. So it's not as simple. People think like, oh, jiu-jitsu, like, can you get like 70 world federations or whatever the number, you know what I mean? For no gi, you can have a team, get some wrestlers, get some guys, for dude, you can get a
Mm-hmm.
team. But with the gi, I feel that it's a little more complicated. So
Yeah, no, I can see that point too. I always thought as well. I mean, we just, and we're just going to use the males as an example. We just got our first non-American, non-Brazilian champion since technically João Hoke, who I think he was South.
97,
Yeah,
Angola.
Angola. He's from Angola, and Adam Wardzinski, first one in years,
Mm-hmm.
years that wasn't American or Brazilian. Like
Tommy almost got it.
Tommy almost got it. He was close. He was very
Yeah.
close. But you see, like we can name on one hand how many times it's been a different country other than Brazil. And so when you think about the Olympics, you think about so many sports represented, right? that's another thing too. We don't have federate. I don't know a federate. I know there's a Japanese one, American one. Obviously, there's a CBJJ and there's IBJF, which is kind of the big umbrella, right? But I don't really know any other ones. There probably is, but and I've also heard so I had opportunity to talk with a lot of people who are deeply invested in the Arizona Muay Thai community, and there's a big talk about should Muay Thai be in the Olympics. And another thing that I think about is the Olympics. They have a gridlock on the rule set. And so whatever rule set Muay Thai, like let's say boxing, there's the Olympic boxing rule set. That's like the one sport where it's kind of, you still have professional boxing, which is still more famous than Olympic boxing. But every other sport that's in the Olympics is the pinnacle. If you think about it, like judo, every judoka wants to go to the Olympics. But I also have never heard a judo practitioner not complain about the rules, not complain about how they have just stripped judo to the bone and you can barely do anything anymore compared to what you could do in the 90s. And I don't want to see that happen to jiu-jitsu either, where we lose the art for the sake of the sport. I think that you still need to have that healthy balance. And that's why right now I think that, we're not necessarily ready for the Olympics in more reasons than one.
For sure. So let's change gear, and then we're going to get back to talking about this your work as a commentator right now. But I want to see you talk about like how martial arts show up in your life. For people who are listening, maybe you might be listening for the first time, you don't know about my work. I've been promoting tournaments. I promoted my first tournament in 1998 back in Brazil, but I've been promoting in Arizona since 2000, and we have a few individuals who competed in all belts, including kids belts, from yellow to black, and you are one of them. Mackenzie Dern is another one. So we have a few individuals have gone through the whole experience of that, which is awesome. So let's talk about your beginning martial arts. What did it come first? Jiu-jitsu come first? Was MMA? What is it?
It's actually humbling to be on that list, by the way. That's really cool to know. I competed in I think it was the first Kids Cup, the very first one, because you didn't do those until later. But anyway, so I just had to share that for a sec. So actually, when we moved to Arizona from Colorado, it was a little bit of a rough situation in Colorado. My dad had to be a superhero for, a little while, about maybe 6-7 months. And we moved to Arizona. My dad meets a woman that would become my stepmother. And I watched UFC 65, which I still have on DVD. And I watched it live with my dad.
Who was the main event?
The main event was George St. Pierre versus Matt Hughes 2. Is when George St. Pierre won the welterweight title for the first time he won it, because then he would lose it to Matt Serra 4 events later and then get it back. He knocks Matt Hughes out with a left head kick, a switch head kick. And I thought GSP was the coolest fighter ever. And I wanted to be like him. So I told my dad, I got to do that. And my dad instantly is like, okay, so this is cage fighting. This is not, so he put me in karate to see if I was even, it's to see if I'm tough and to build up what he thought was the right thing. I actually started in Taekwondo, where Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu was 1 day a week. The instructor was a black belt by the name of Master Eric Mendoza. I still keep in touch loosely with him to this day. I actually ended up being able to teach him and coach him in his first Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu tournament years later. But I did 3.5 years of American freestyle Taekwondo, and I got my black belt at 12 years old. And that was, it was way different than jiu-jitsu, by the way. Like the process of it, as I'm sure you can imagine, was much more, I would even call it mundane. And I don't mean that disrespectfully. It's just more mundane. It's Americanized Taekwondo. But I did that, and I still wanted to compete in kickboxing. So I competed in kickboxing. I still wanted to compete in jiu-jitsu. So I went and I did Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu tournament, which you probably remember this too. Desert Quest at the Broadway Rec Center, run by Roland Saria. So my dad found this tournament, and we started going, and we would go every month because he had it every month. And we'd walk in, and Eye of the Tigers playing, and the whole nine. Just remembering this is so crazy to me because it's so nostalgic. But we would go to these tournaments as I'm practicing Taekwondo, doing jiu-jitsu 1 day a week, maybe 2 days a week if he has like another class that he wants to do. And I met in my second tournament there, I met a kid by the name of Clayton Carpenter. And Clayton was, he was actually practicing jiu-jitsu on a regular basis, doing, all these things. And then what's crazy is, do you know Christopher Putnam? He's a brown belt from my gym.
The photographer.
Yes, Chris Magic. He was there. None of us knew each other, but he was there and he recorded our match randomly. He just felt like recording because he'd never seen kids jiu-jitsu before. So he records it and then he found it later on. It's actually on YouTube. You can see the first time I ever fought Clayton. Clayton beats me and he falls me out of the arena and he says, "You should come train with me." And I was, I was super upset because I just lost. And so I'm like, God, no, but my dad and his dad exchanged numbers. I'm like, keep in mind, I'm 9 years old at this point. And I started training with him. So I left Taekwondo at about 12. I was, I would see him every now and again and I would talk to him, but then I eventually left at like 12 years old. I had a black belt in Taekwondo. So I went and I started training jiu-jitsu with Clayton. So I was introduced actually first to Taekwondo. I did 2 kickboxing fights when I was, 9 or 10, which again, it's youth. But I mostly did Taekwondo and I competed actually in Taekwondo. And I won the state championship twice, but then I would move on to jiu-jitsu. And I was doing jiu-jitsu, boxing, Muay Thai, wrestling, MMA class from 12 years old until I was 17 years old. And I've known Clayton ever since, obviously.
Clayton, I remember did he get in UFC? Because I know that he won. Is he still on the roster?
Yes, he is. So he was scheduled to fight the person who just fought for the flyweight title against Alexandre Pantoja. He was Steve Ursig. Clayton was scheduled to fight Steve Ursig, but Clayton he got a torn bicep, and so he was sidelined. He had surgery. I believe he's looking for a fight now. I'm unsure, but I know that he is on the UFC flyweight roster. He did win the Dana White Contender Series. He won 1 match in the flyweight division. Now he's waiting on another opponent.
So how was for you competing, starting as a kid? I'm curious, like mentally speaking, how was for you to compete in jiu-jitsu and compete in a striking form? Did you feel any difference? Mentally speaking?
Getting punched in the face is scarier. It is something you have to wrap your head around in a little bit of a different way. And as a child, I was under the impression that I needed to be super hyped up every single time. I always needed to be hyped up. I needed to be absolutely intense in the zone. Because I would emulate George St. Pierre. So I was always emulating him. He would look all focused and, in the zone. And that's just not who I am. It's never been who I am, but I'm emulating an idol, And I think that when I was competing in jiu-jitsu, when I was doing it a lot, it became more and more like the gym where you're just always rolling. And in the tournament, doesn't really matter. Maybe I'm a little more sharp in the tournament, but I do this every day. You don't get like Vaseline put on your face and a mouthpiece and a headgear and, the 12-ounce gloves. You don't get that all the time. Or going and I would do Indian reservation MMA fights at Soboba Indian Reservation. And I did a fight, no headgear, and I was 14 years old. That was way scarier than any jiu-jitsu match I had before that time. I will say that I didn't start doing like jiu-jitsu super fights until later on. I think I was like 17 or 18 when I did my first one. And that was a foreign concept to me because it's like all this preparation for one match. And now that seems to be the professional normative. So I was used to tournaments. And whenever you do a fight, you're training for one dude. That fight could be over in 15 seconds, which sometimes it was. Whereas a tournament, you're preparing for multiple matches. So I think there's also that little bit of a mental wrestling that goes into it where if I'm thinking about multiple matches, I'm thinking about my first opponent, and I have to also think about conserving energy, doing the smart thing, playing a smart game plan so that I don't waste energy for my next fight, that kind of thing. And it was interesting to navigate that as a kid. I had to rely heavily on Andre, which was good because he was a very intelligent coach in that regard. I had to rely heavily on his wisdom because if I had it my way, I would have just gone and blown my entire gas tank in the first round every single time. So that's what I kind of felt like.
So I feel like you're like a consistent competitor as far as the performance. I feel like you said, like I'm at the school, I'm rolling, feeling pretty good. So I want to hear like the good and the not so good, meaning I want to first the not so good experience that you felt like you did not perform to the best of your ability for whatever reason. You felt like your nerves got the best of you. Is there anything in particular that kind of stands out?
A time where my nerves got the best of me. I would say there has been some times where like when I was competing against Ronaldo Jr., sometimes I would not perform my best because I was nervous to fight him. There was one time where I competed against Levi Jones Leary at purple belt. Coming into that match, I had beaten him twice at juvenile no-gi. He was very, very good. Our matches were very close. Then I fight him at purple belt, middleweight. It was Pan Am's 2017, I believe. And I go out, I'm nervous to fight him for some reason. Even though I know I beat this guy before, I'm nervous. I go out there and he just ruins me. So that's one instance where I was very nervous. I mean, and when I say ruins, I mean like 12-0 ruins. He took my back with a burn bolo on a side that I should know better than to step forward my right leg at that moment in my career because I wasn't ready. I didn't have the faculties and the practice on that defense. Then there's a time where actually, and I want to talk about this, I was juggling two different ideas in my head career-wise. It was American Nationals 2018. I came into the match and I didn't even really want to be at the tournament. I went there because it was the thing to do. I was just competing all the time. So I went there. I really wasn't passionate. And one of the reasons why is because I was working security at a bar called Whiskey Row Gilbert, which is down here, not too far from my house in Gilbert, Arizona. And it's like a club. And so I was working security there to try to make extra money and do all the things. I was just exploring. I was sowing oats, and it turned out to take an incredible toll on my body, on my sleep, on my performance, on my motivation, because, staying up until 5 a.m. on a Saturday night because you're working and then having to catch up on sleep Sunday so I can wake up at 5 a.m. Monday to train. It's like my clock was all over the place. And so I went out and I fought Adrian Nez, who's a good friend of mine, actually. And I fought him in American Nationals. And at that point, I had never lost to Adrian. I essentially just was able to always sort of be one step ahead in the matches that we had. And he was always getting better, but I was always getting better. He goes out there, he submits me in 15 seconds with a footlock. And I get off the mat and I didn't even care. And I was embarrassed that I didn't care. It was weird. It was a weird cocktail of emotions inside of me because I didn't care about the result of the match, but I knew I should. And so I was embarrassed that I had gotten to that point in my career. So I got off the mat and I quit my job. I said, I'm not going to put in my 2 weeks. He's like, no, Jake, please put in your 2 weeks. Let's come back and talk about it. And I quit. I put in my 2 weeks and I wrote out my 2 weeks because that's the thing that you do as a man, in my opinion, whenever you agree to something like that. But that was an instance where that was I didn't feel so good about my performance there. But like you said, I do feel like I had a lot of consistency in my career. I didn't have a lot of matches. There is another one actually. Fight to Win in Hawaii was one more example I'll give. I fought Michael Lira Jr. This was after I had beat Orlando Montero in the Long Beach Open. And FloGrappling put me on, they essentially gave me Orlando's ranking, which was number 7 at the medium heavyweight division at the time. And that was a big win for me. I was very excited. Orlando always was one of those competitors in Arizona where I was very respectful of, and I respected his game a lot. I always wanted an opportunity to compete against him, not, to prove myself or anything like that, but just because there's like that competitive thing, you want to go share the match with the guy. And if I ever go to Hawaii, I would love to train with him as well. But I fought him, beat him, and then I fought Michael Lira Jr. in Fight to Win. And when that happened, I just got so nervous. I think I got to single leg X immediately, and that's where I wanted to be. And he just stepped out of it, head control past my guard, and choked me from the back like I didn't have any single leg X knowledge. Like as if my single leg X guard was brand new and I was just trying it out. And that was a moment where I felt devastated after that loss because I knew it was because I was nervous. I was so nervous to fight him. I don't know why. Sometimes it would just get the better of me. And I didn't call anybody. I didn't do the responsible thing and like call Andre and tell him, hey, this is how I'm feeling. I didn't do any of that. I just dealt with it. When I could have called Andre, I could have called a friend. I could have called Cade Roke, one of my closest training partners for years. I could have called anybody at my gym, but I didn't.
Yeah, because I was going to ask what was possibly the lesson. And like you said, you didn't even know why you felt this way. Because when I talk about, especially mental coach, do seminars and stuff like that, and I talk about it, I tell like everyone got a sad story to tell. A day that things didn't work for whatever reason. the nerves got the best of you. I always mention like something happens, and it's your job, is your duty to find the root of the issue and deal with it. So hopefully minimize the chance of happening again. It can always happen, but like try to find the source of the problem. So were you able in those to reflect, or you couldn't really tell? Because a lot of the times it's just that the fear of the undesired outcome, you know what I mean? Of just the loss itself.
So I learned my lesson two ways. I went and I talked to Michael Lira after the fight. I went and I did my thing, the competitor thing where you go find a corner to cry in for a little bit because you're devastated or whatever. And then I really had like the realization 2 days before the event and the day before the event, I walked around Hawaii so much. And I was so tired at the end of every day. I wasn't responsible. That's the first thing. And the realization that I wasn't responsible was weighing in the back of my mind. At this stage in my life as well, this is about 2019 that all this was happening. At this stage in my life, I was pushing down a lot of insecurity and a lot of just general feelings about myself that weren't positive that I just buried, right? And I was always very outgoing, when I was in my element, I was always very outgoing. I wasn't being fake. It's just you don't live. I didn't want to put on like almost, hey, look, I'm an insecure person. So I was dealing with that. Then also, I feel like there was that pressure of this is almost again the insecurity of I am not a guy that should beat Michael Lira Jr. I'm not that guy. That's like what was in my head as well. So when I lost, I went and I talked to him and he told me, he's like, did you study for me? Did you study for my game? And I said, no. And he said, well, I studied you because I took you seriously. He's like, and man, this is what you did. You did this against Roberto and you didn't even fix it against me. You didn't fix your mistakes. And in that moment, what that taught me is, wow, Michael Lira Jr. is humble enough. He has enough humility to teach somebody. He just worked on like a stage in Hawaii, just absolutely worked me. And he had the resolve and he had the goodwill to teach me as well. And then I learned my lesson also from Seth Daniels, the owner of Fight to Win. He just looks me dead in the face, hands me my check and says, pick your chin up, dust yourself off. You got mine, Mohibamar in 2 weeks. And I was like, man, I like wiped my tears and I'm like, oh, well, shoot, I got to stop focusing on this match and I got to take the lessons that Michael just taught me. And I think that that's really what it was is I didn't feel like I was somebody who should beat one of these guys who have earned their spot. And two, I wasn't responsible and I knew I wasn't responsible. I heard a saying that you should always do like, don't let anything other than actual skill define the match. You should work as hard as you can. You should eat as well as you can. You should sleep as well as you can. If the guy's better than you, he's just better than you. And that's way easier for me to deal with than I didn't do this, and this.
One of the things that you mentioned that catch my attention that I try to tell people, like you mentioned, about like you went there and then you're going around and it's like, yay, it's a party. Yeah. So I tell people like, hey, this is a business trip, and after business, and then you can do your tourism stuff. You know what I mean? Because for sure, I mean, sometimes you go on vacation, you need a vacation for the vacation. You know what I mean? Because you're so tired from like just walking around and just doing all kinds of stuff. So that is one. Make sure that you always say like, man, go compete. It's a business trip. And after you can have, good moments. And something else that I talk about too, the importance of, like I had a seminar last week, and we talk about before, during, and after, as far as mindset, right? After the performance, it's very important. Take responsibility and analyzing performance, winning or losing. That's exactly what you mentioned there, told you, because when we go analyze a performance, winning or losing, I mean, there's 4 specific areas. Let's talk about the loss per se. It could be a technical mistake, something that, like, I messed up this or that. Okay. It could be a tactical strategic mistake, because sometimes it's not like, how it is. It's not necessarily you made a technical mistake, but you made a poor choice, So it's not necessarily like I need to drill this more. Like, no, you made this choice, led to this way. So strategy is definitely going to be a big one. You're going to have the physical aspect, which did catch you, because affected, your performance. And physical can include nutrition, because if you're going to compete the day of in IBJJF and you go in dehydrated for like 2 days with nothing in your body, and I always mention, like, make the weight's not the problem. The problem is to make weight and compete right after. You know what I mean? So it doesn't matter if you drive Ferrari and got no gas, you're driving that bad boy. You know what I mean? So your body's the same way, and you need to handle that better. Or it could be like mental aspect, something that, and of course it can be a combination. A lot of the times can be like, if you put pillars, like maybe the technical was very low and then the strategic was more, and then the physical is just different areas will influence more. So that's good that you're at least able from there to kind of grow from that specific scenario.
Yeah, and it influenced a lot of my decisions as a competitor. I feel as though after the Michael Liera loss, I had a huge swing up. After I lost to Michael Liera, I would lose a very close split decision to Manuel Hibamar. Very close. And probably the closest match of my life, actually. And then after that, I had a little bit more. It was like that extra I needed. And then I was specifically on the fight to win stage. I felt like I really excelled in that rule set. I don't know why people they wouldn't grapple according to the rules against me, it benefited me. But I would beat Arnaldo Maidana, Ronaldo Jr., Hudson Mateos, Mateos Luna, and Pedro Mourinho all on the fight to win stage within a period of like a couple of years.
That's awesome.
So 5 wins because of what I learned from Liera. It was because I studied all of those. I studied every single one of them for weeks. I would formulate a game plan specifically for them with Andre. I took care of my diet. I made sure to get a lot of sleep. The only time I didn't get a lot of sleep was the match I was the most nervous for in my entire career, and that was Hudson Mateos, because that guy was breaking people's arms.
Yeah,
like
he's a killer.
He was a very scary competitor to compete against. And it didn't help that people would message me and say, dude, don't get your arm broken. I'm like, what kind of advice is that? It's the worst advice I've ever heard. But so I didn't sleep. I got like 4 hours of sleep. And I had like 3 energy drinks before the match. It was terrible, but I won. And then that was a lesson in itself too, where it's like, dude, you need to get a grip on this. You can do this. You are a black belt. You were given the match for a reason. It's not because you're a scrub. You can do it. You need to believe in yourself a little bit more. So confidence and self-belief was something that sometimes I would excel at, but it was always the same reasons for my failures at it as well. The times where I would struggle were always for the same reasons. And the times where I would succeed were always for the same reasons as well. And I didn't get a grip on that really until I started walking with the Lord. Never had a grip on it, ever.
That's awesome. Now, looking at the good performance. So when I talk about good performance, it doesn't mean, because sometimes a good performance can come from a loss. You know what I mean? Like, for people who listen there, like if you've been competing or training and competing for a while, maybe you have a scenario that you're like, man, I did great and I lost, or I did awful and I won. Oh boy, it was ugly, but I won. So it depends how we want to really analyze your performance. But when I talk about the good performance, could be like, when you're like, it's very unique flow experience. Things just slow down when you just, have one of your best, like you super comfortable on the mat. So what is the experience that comes to your mind?
Ironically, I just mentioned how scared I was to go against Hudson. The match is on YouTube. It's one of the most boring matches ever, probably. But it's exactly what I did, everything exactly that I needed to do to beat Hudson Mateos. Every turn of the match, I completely was able to neutralize. He never mounted any offense on me the entire match. I actually almost passed his guard. I got him in an omoplata at the end of the match. I was able to because the whole game plan was slow him down. Do not let him play guard with you. And I don't care if you double sit the entire match. Do not let him play guard with you. Do not let him under your leg. So no 50-50, no close guard, no guard at all. Those are the game plan, because that will slow him down. He doesn't like to pass the guard a whole lot. So, and not that he's not good at it. He just prefers the guard. And so I knew that. And I felt like that was just, in the match, even I kind of had a note of it. I was like, wow, this is going very well. This is going very, very well. And then I was able to win that match. That's one example. Another example of a tournament where I just felt so good was actually my very first tournament as a black belt. It was the IBJJF Austin Open. I believe it was in 2019, the Austin Summer Open. Another one of those tournaments where I just didn't get up. Man, I'm not. Then now that I'm telling you this and I'm saying it out loud, I'm realizing that I would not sleep when I got really nervous. But I didn't get very good sleep the night before because again, I was so nervous. I had this like, man, am I gonna be a fraud out there? Do I really belong at black belt? My first match in the black belt division was a person who got third, is Vinicius Fajeda, and he got third at Europeans the year before. So I was like, oh my gosh, what am I gonna do? But I went out there and I got 4 gold medals and I won all my fights by submission. It was 10 fights, 10 submissions. And that was, the whole weekend, because it's, Saturday gi, Sunday no gi, the whole weekend, I felt untouchable. I felt so good to the point where it made me emotional because it was almost like this confirmation of I do belong here. And I had one of the best performances of my entire career in my first tournament. And then after that, I carried it forward a little bit. I got double gold at Phoenix Open after that. And I competed in another tournament, a Long Beach Open I won. So I was doing good. I was putting together solid gold medals at black belt. But that tournament was special for me or both of those anyway, because they're on the back end of some of the most nervous moments. And then I just was able to kind of lock into the flow state where I was just doing jujitsu. I wasn't thinking about competition. I was just doing it because it's beautiful and because I love it. And I was having fun and I was doing the techniques I like and they were working. And it was just, I don't like using this word, but it felt magical,
It's still on the same match. Anything that you could point it out like different? Because sometimes when I ask people, I want to see like what led to that, you know what I mean? Of you feeling that good? What is the combination of things that led to that, you feeling that good?
I would say as soon as I made my grip on Vinicius Fajeda in the first match, I wrap a footlock and I get the footlock, which is one of my favorite techniques. I did it all throughout competition as a color belt, and I did it at black belt as well. And I submit the straight ankle lock. And then I felt like, oh my gosh, I just won my first match at black belt. And then I get off the mat, I come back on, and now it's a black belt he was a 4-stripe black belt. And I was like, okay, this guy got experience. And then I choke him from the back. And then after that match, I felt like the nerves went away. And I just felt like, oh, wow, I can do this. I'm going to go sign up for the absolute. I'm feeling great. And then I submitted everybody in the absolute. And then I was like, man, this is incredible. I feel amazing. I can't wait for tomorrow. I can't wait for Nogi. I'm going to sign up for the absolute now while I can. So I signed up for the Nogi absolute. And then the next day I just went into the first match with that confidence too, because I knew, I was like, man, I can do this. Like, I can do this. I know I can do this. And so I think I needed that. It's almost like when a kid is scared to climb a tree and then he goes and he sees a kid climb the tree and he's like, oh, that's not that bad. Actually, I just saw him do it. And then they go climb the tree. I needed that for myself, with myself. I needed to have the experience of, okay, I just did it. So I know now I don't need to be scared of it, if that makes sense.
Absolutely. So let's change gear and talk about your career as a commentator. When do you feel like you had the kind of the spark to like, this is something I kind of want to do? I'm saying, talking about just like the interest of like that thought came to your mind.
Yeah. I've always been interested in media since I was a kid. I would always make YouTube videos when I was younger. I took a 3-year video production course in high school, learning how to do voiceover and news anchor. I wanted to be a news anchor in high school, actually. And then I made the decision senior year to just pursue jiu-jitsu. Here's the moment, though, that I realized I want to try, because I didn't know if I would like it. I just knew I wanted to try it. I fought Roberto Jimenez in the co-main event of a fight to win here in Arizona. And he beat me. And I had to go back and watch the video eventually once my pride and my ego simmered down a little bit. And I watched it and I realized the commentators, and I'll keep them, their identities, I don't want to speak poorly of them, but on that specific match, it was some of the most biased and partial commentary I've ever heard. And it was towards me. And I didn't like that, because Roberto Jimenez at brown belt, he's a very famous competitor already. And I feel like as a commentator, your job is to create fans. Your job is to point people towards these athletes. Like it's about the athletes. And so the whole match, they were just confounded that Roberto was doing good against Jake Watson. And I'm just like, this is so backwards, like this is so, just because it's in Arizona doesn't mean that I'm like, I'm not the next amazing thing to come out of Arizona. I'm just me. And so I became actually a little frustrated because it did two things. One, Roberto submitting me with that commentary. It makes Roberto look like a nobody submitting a somebody, which is not true for him. It doesn't give him any fans. They didn't know anything about Roberto and all that kind of stuff. And it doesn't do Roberto any justice because he deserves the spotlight. He won the fight. And so if Roberto gets an amazing submission on me, he should have like the awesome soundbite. He shouldn't have the commentators going, no way. Oh my gosh, I can't believe that happened. Oh, he beat Jake Watt. You know what I mean? He deserves the proper impartial commentary. And so I lobbied after that for a long time, like, man, a year, 2 years, maybe. And then I finally got my shot 2 years later, commentating for a tournament in Vegas at Cobrinha BJJ in Las Vegas with Hector Vasquez. I don't know if you know Hector, but Hector Vasquez is, so we want to talk about entrepreneur. He'll tell you he's just a trip to talk to. The guy is so motivated. He's like a ball of energy. I have to tell him, listen, I don't have time for 5 ideas right now. I need like 2. I got time for 2. But he's great. He gave me his first shot. I did it for free. I paid to go out to Vegas and commentate a Grand Prix. It was actually Andy Murasaki's black belt debut, where in the final he would beat Mateus Gabriel. And I commentated alongside Mikey Musumeci and this guy named Richard Allen. I didn't know what was going to happen. The whole thing was crazy, but I finally got my shot. But what made me interested in it actually was my prior interest in just high school, because I loved video production. But when I heard the commentary over Roberto beating me, I was like, somebody's got to do something. I want to make a change. I want to do this right. And that's where the interest started.
Beautiful, man. In big props, you've been doing a great job.
Thank you.
Really have. I've been enjoying when you and Danny work together. Guys got a really good chemistry too.
Mm-hmm.
And man, it does matter. It does help when you have like a guy that has competed in a high level. You know what I mean? Or even what you said, just having the empathy for the competitors. You know what I mean? Of like you said, you're not being biased or whatever, just having that empathy, knowing what it's like to be there. And it's like, and it sucks, man. And it sucks when you're, or when you lose or have a better performance or whatever. And then again, understanding the situations, because sometimes, you know how it is. Yeah. Sometimes you can have some organizations, they put someone, maybe the person has a cool voice, but it's like, ooh, like a little bit, a little bit painful, and especially as jiu-jitsu gets more complex, or leg tangles or lapels or whatever, be able to be like, okay, I'm aware what's going on. You know what I mean? So that can be very difficult for some people.
Do you know something, Gustavo? There's actually a depth of commentary I'm learning about in the last 2 years. So there is and I don't know if you know the difference between play-by-play and color. So there's a big difference. So the play-by-play guy, I'm going to use a man who I greatly respect, who's taught me a lot about this. His name is TJ DeSantis. TJ does not do jiu-jitsu, and yet he commentates some jiu-jitsu events, and he does a fantastic job. And here's why. Because he is a play-by-play commentator. The play-by-play guy is the bus driver, and the color commentator is the tour guide. You will remember the tour guide. The tour guide knows the sites. He knows the information. The bus driver just drives the bus. He's the one making the turns. He's the one stopping for red lights. He's making sure the production doesn't crash. That is actually what I'm doing. And the reason why I can do it well is because I know jiu-jitsu and because I know mixed martial arts and these things to such a degree that I know when to stop, I know when to prod, I know when to push the buttons, and to have the color commentator add color. Now with me and Danny, actually we both kind of do both roles because we're very close friends. Danny's one of my best friends. He was a groomsman at my wedding. And we did a podcast together for over 100 episodes. He works with the IBJJF very closely. I mean, you've worked with Danny too. You know how great he is. And it's been great working with him. We can be way more relaxed. But oftentimes I have to work with people I don't know. And
Mm-hmm.
other organizations, they don't have a distinction between play-by-play and color. And so then you just have two dudes on a mic with no direction, no clue of what their job is or what their role is. And that's why you have people talking over each other, or they're both just kind of biased. The color guy is meant to be the one with the knowledge. It's like in the UFC, you have John Anik, you have Joe Rogan, and you have Daniel Cormier. John Anik is clearly a play-by-play guy. He doesn't do this. He doesn't do the art. He is a broadcast professional. He's the one who has the knowledge of, okay, I'm going to say how much time's on the clock. I'm going to thank our sponsors. I'm going to pitch to Joe Rogan to give us some information about the UFC. I'm going to pitch to Daniel Cormier, the analyst, to talk about the fight. You have a play-by-play, a color, and an analyst. And I think that jiu-jitsu, what I hope to do is I hope to push the barrier to where it can sound more like a professional sport. That's why I try not to go outside my lane whenever I'm in the play-by-play role. I try to pitch it to Danny because Danny's the IBJJF analyst. He's the one that knows the IBJJF agenda like the back of his hand. I don't need to pretend like I know more than him. I'm the play-by-play guy. And then that's how you avoid arguments on the air. It's become an art form for me. And I really, really enjoy it. I really enjoy it because if I work in MMA, I'm not an MMA fighter. I can be a color guy in jiu-jitsu because I've competed at the highest level. I've tasted the biggest stages. But in MMA, I haven't. So I'm not a color guy for MMA. I would have to be play-by-play. Does that make sense?
Absolutely. And interesting, I was watching the worlds, the finals. I was watching the Portuguese version. I think Kyle does a great job.
I like Kyle.
I really enjoy, like, I have listened to him in the Portuguese. I never seen him doing English before, but like when I have the both, you know, and of course the dude is like so knowledgeable. I mean, you know, no comments with that. He's incredible. But I did catch, like you just said, like the little argument in the thing. So next thing, the dude is saying something, and then Kyle's like, well, not really. You know what I mean? Like, but he was doing the not really more. I'm talking like he was right. You know what I mean? And I saw someone who made a video and made that comment, and I think maybe it was Victor Doria. I think here, because he does his wrap up, you know, videos in Portuguese, and I was listening, and I think he mentioned that and saying like, you know, like, how you're doing great, you know what I mean, like, so like everything like on point. And then the other person, I don't know who he is, but it was like crossing those lines that you're talking about, you know. So it does feel sometimes kind of weird, because now Kyle's just like, well, I do need to say something because what he's saying is not accurate. So I need to kind of fix. So it was definitely strange, but he did an incredible job. So I really enjoy when he does.
My take on that is because you know how, have you ever heard of a watch together, or what is it called? Watch together. A fight companion. So Joe Rogan does these sometimes, where if you and I, Gustavo, let's say we had me, you, and I don't know, Aaron Wilson, we all got on a podcast together, and we all met and we sat on a couch with mics and we watched the worlds. And then we put like the camera on us and we were just talking about worlds. Then you don't need the distinction of play-by-play color because we're just talking. And I think some people do sometimes in their commentary, it becomes a podcast because you're on the mic together for 5 hours sometimes. Like it can feel like a podcast. Now it's not, and you have to remember that it's not, and that's when arguments start to happen. And sometimes Danny and I will have moments where we're laughing hard. Like one of the referees, I don't know his name, unfortunately, Mayor Malvez had a grip in his right hand and he punched the ref in the face on accident. And Danny and I saw it, looked at each other, and I was like, oh my gosh, that ref just got punched in the face. And Danny started laughing. And it's a great moment, but we have to retain that. We have to circle back to the professionalism of it. And I think that, you know, there's been times where I was wrong and Danny had corrected me. And I said, thank you, Danny. Back to the action, you know, like, thank you, Danny, for correcting me. Didn't know I was wrong, but we're back to the action. And you got to have that sort of professional broadcaster in you to realize, okay, well, I said something wrong just now. There was one fight where I called Mayara Custodio. I called her Ana Cueto like 5 times. I'm like, that's not her name. And I knew it wasn't her name, but I'm saying it. And Danny's like, mutes my mic and he goes, dude, that's not her name. And I'm like, oh my gosh, I'm so sorry. And then I had to say on air, ladies and gentlemen, I've been calling her Anna Cueto, but that's not her name. Her name is Mayara Custodio, and she's about to pass the guard right now. You just got to know how to,
Yeah.
get back in there. I do love Kaio's commentary. I love when we would do the Who's Number Ones. I would purposely try to get Kaio to give me some take because I know he'll always give a take. He'll always give some opinion about something. And so it was like Majid Hage versus JT Torres. I'm like, come on, Kaio, tell me why Majid's gonna win. Tell me what is Majid's path to victory? And Kaio just goes, he has none or something like that. I'm like, man, Kaio, give him a chance. But I love Kaio Terra. He's a great mind for the sport, and he's a great personality for the sport too, in my opinion.
Yeah, no, it's awesome that Danny is like in a good way, like the ultimate like jujitsu nerd of like
Oh
knows like
yeah.
freaking like everyone's story and everything. That's awesome.
It knows everything. He knows the IBJJF statistics. Like he knew how many wins Tynan Dalbra had, what was his submission rate, what was Mika Galvan's submission rate, and it's not his entire submission rate. It's just his IBJJF submission rate. And so they don't have that statistic on the IBJJF website. Danny is actually compiling this real time. He's researching it and he's putting it together. Because I can go on BJJ Heroes and I can trust Andre Borges. I can trust him, right? Because I think he's a great reporter. But at the same time, man, what if he does miss something? Danny is going back through the history books and he is looking for every single match of these competitors before he commentates for them. It's really cool to watch. I don't know that I could do it, to be honest. He's got patience in spades. But it is a blessing to be able to commentate alongside him, especially for IBJJF events, because I never have to wonder, is the IBJJF going to be okay with what my commentator's saying? I know Danny's going to do a good job for the IBJJF agenda. He has to, I don't bring up ADCC. I don't bring up UFC Fight Pass Invitational. It's unprofessional of me to do that because I'm not working for that business right now. I'm working for the IBJJF. I should be working to amplify, glorify, and build up the IBJJF because they contracted me to help them do so. It's not like I have a bad relationship with the other companies. It's just not. For one weekend, I can talk only about IBJJF. So, and Danny does a great job of that.
Man, for me, it's incredible to see the growth of jiu-jitsu and the CBJJ, IBJJF. For people maybe don't know, again, we got so many new people getting into jiu-jitsu world. But when I look back, the first Brazilian nationals took place by IBJJF in 1994, so, and then they did a PANS in 95, but they count because it has some other organization with them, but they count more like the 96, but they did in 95. And then the first worlds in 1996. And I was very blessed to compete at the very first worlds in 1996 when they have 3 mats going on. You know what I mean? Like at Tijuca, just so, it's interesting. They never did it again, but the results when they came out, like at first, they weren't like mentioning schools or mentioning countries. So it was like Brazil and Brazil. And then became like, because I don't remember them then mention it was a little bit more that has some little small local magazines and mention like, the country. So of course, most of it Brazil, but just be able to see now like that many mats and then show at the same time and have commentators and all that people don't realize. I'm a big fan of the IBJJF. It's like, do I agree with everything the organization does? Of course not. You're gonna have like your opinions, but that's their business. But it's like you have and I'm a fan. It's like I have my soccer team. Do I agree with everything the management does with the club? But I'm not gonna stop cheering for them. You know what I mean? Like maybe don't agree with certain things, but just the ability. People complain like, oh, they're expensive. Oh, they don't give any money. Now they give you money, and if they give money, oh, it's not enough. There's always something.
Yeah.
But they got to remember that, man, they started from like nothing. I remember talking with remember Luca Talla. Luca Talla, he's one of the founders of Gracie Mag. Okay.
No, I never met.
Yeah, Luca Talla, he's not I think he teaches right now, but he's not involved with press anymore. But he was, him and Marcelo Alonso, the first two jiu-jitsu reporters,
Wow.
period. Right. So he ran Gracie Mag for many, many years. So he became a partner with Carlos Gracie Jr. And I remember talking with him many years ago, and he said like this, we're talking about like early 90s, okay? He
Hmm.
had a meeting at a Gracie Barra, and then Carlinhos was saying like, we gonna have jiu-jitsu, and this is before even Brazilian nationals, this is before worlds, you know. It said like, we gonna have jiu-jitsu tournaments all over the world, and you have gonna have multiple tournaments on the same day. People are laughing at him,
Hmm.
saying that they're like, dude, he's getting crazy. You know what I mean? It's like he's
Yeah.
completely delusional, out of his mind. You know what I mean? Look where we at now.
We're doing exactly his vision.
Yeah.
Exactly
So
right now.
there's no bigger visionary than him. And to be able to come here, something else people don't know. They see the pans and be like, oh my God, there's so many competitors that make so many money, so much money. Now, the very first pans in 1995 and 96. So let's say 95, because he's the one, you know, involved with it.
Hmm.
It was at the Irvine, what's the name of the college, the one that they had?
Is it the Brand Event Center?
Yeah,
Pan
yeah,
Am's?
like,
Yes.
yeah. So the ones that have. So the dude left Brazil to do a tournament for 200 people. You know what I mean? On that same venue that they did for many years after. Did anyone ask if he made any money? You know what I mean? Like, hey, did you make any money? Dude, of
Yeah.
course you lost a lot of money, out of your mind.
Hmm.
You know what I mean? And that was back, he wasn't living in the US. So for you to have the guts, you know what I mean, to just have the vision and say like, I'm going to do it. So that's why I'm such a big fan of the guy's vision. You know what I mean? It's just amazing. And if it wasn't for him, I don't know where jiu-jitsu would be. I really don't know. You know what I mean?
I absolutely do. And I'm 26 years old, and I talk with people who are older than me even. And there's a very narrow-minded view in jiu-jitsu in some instances. I am very appreciative of the IBJJF. And one thing that I will say is, when is the last time you saw an IBJJF event look anything other than like Worlds looks like every other event? It's something some people complain about, but the referees are in suits, they're in ties, they conduct themselves typically, otherwise they're fired, right? Typically in a very orderly fashion. The rule set, if there's changes, there's a lot of, hey, we're going to let everybody know about these changes. There's rule seminars. The referees were all brown belt or black belt. It's very, very streamlined. It's very professional. It feels like we already kind of have the Olympics, if that makes sense. Uh, when people are so quick to just go, there's no money. It's like, man, you pay money to do this sport, like you already pay however much money per year. Let's say the typical gym membership is $140. What's 140 times 12? Man, you're already paying over $1,000 a year just to do jujitsu. And so, the athletes are put on a pedestal, and I think that it's nice for kids to be able to say, I want to be a jiu-jitsu athlete. That's awesome, but you're not going to make millions of dollars as an athlete. You're at least not yet, maybe ever.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, let's be honest, maybe ever. Jiu-jitsu is a niche sport, and it's beautiful that it's a niche sport. I don't understand why people can't just love jiu-jitsu and love everything. I've worked for the Professional Grappling Federation. That's a UFC Fight Pass event owned by a 10th Planet black belt. IBJJF, biggest organization for at least gi Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, let's call it, and I'll just be respectful of that, in the world. ADCC, that is the Abu Dhabi Combat Club. That's the other big one compared to IBJJF, let's say. I've worked for so many organizations, and I have great relationships with all of them. And I think that we as a community need to remember that a rising tide raises all boats. It does. It's a good thing that all of these events are happening. Learn to love all of them, because why would you hate? I know people who hate the IBJJF, and I'm like, why? Because you can't win in their rule set? That's really what it is, because you don't like their rule set. You
Mm-hmm.
don't complain about the most organized tournament in the world, because it's organized. Let's be honest. Like, nothing ever changes. You know exactly when you're supposed to weigh in. You know exactly when you're supposed to, your name's on the board, go weigh in. It's simple. and it's streamlined, it's efficient. I don't know. I feel like I've been around Andre as well, who's very traditional. And so I grew up with a very IBJJF forward mentality where it was like IBJJF was the only tournament I'd compete at. Now I compete at a lot, or I might compete. I'm trying to get back in a competition. Actually, we can get into that later probably. But I would like to compete everywhere because I love jiu-jitsu.
Yeah, dude. And me speaking as an immigrant, I've been this year, I have officially lived in the United States for 25 years and 24 in Brazil. That a trip.
Congratulations.
Yeah,
That is a
that's a
trip.
trip. And yeah. But one thing that kind of like related to the Brazilian immigrants that came here, the reason why, like I have my house, I have my school, and I was able to provide for my family because of the visa that I got, because what I accomplished in the IBJJF. That is why I got my, it's called O1 visa. They call for like extraordinary ability, like I'm extraordinary, but it's just like it's for sports or like actors, or they do like very specific, situations. And I was able to get that because if I didn't have those accomplishments, it'd be like, why do you deserve this actual this visa? You know what I mean? So
Yeah.
sometimes it's, again, I'm not gonna judge, but a lot of times some of the Brazilians who live here and they got their visa, and because of like what was built, and then I'm like, hey, well, like they need credit. You know what I mean? Otherwise, you
Mm-hmm.
wouldn't be here. So jiu-jitsu still have so much to grow. I saw the growth of in Brazil. Like I started in 1989. Until that point, until 1990, 91, that's when it was like a really flip in Brazil for a very specific event that kind of flip, the scene in Brazil. But people think, Brazilian jiu-jitsu, everyone knew who jiu-jitsu was. No. Jiu-jitsu, it was more like an underground type of deal. It
Mm-hmm.
wasn't really popular. It did not have a very good reputation, kind of thugs and fights or whatever, and because IBJJF to start promoting like tournaments, and then people start to be like, because everyone, a bunch of like knuckleheads just training, there's nowhere to challenge themselves, they're gonna get in fights, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah.
so now you having like, hey, we have a platform to actually compete. So that was, the 90s were very not just competitive, but rivalry speaking, just like it was super intense. We got to beat them, this and that. And of course, as us Brazilians moved to the US, we brought the culture too. So the
Mm-hmm.
early days, we have a lot of that brought from the Brazilian culture. And now it's a lot more chill. You know what I mean? And
Yeah.
back in the day, you go visit a school, it's like, like we got to show them what's up, someone's visit. And now we got visitors all the time. People come in, they're visiting
Mm-hmm.
town and stuff. Is it everywhere like that? No, but it's so much more friendly than it was back in the day. So that's why one of the things with our organization that we don't tolerate is like disrespecting staff or
Mm-hmm.
coaches, or like people getting crazy, and then we're gonna penalize them and sometimes ban them because we're like, dude, we came such a long way, you know what I
Mm-hmm.
mean? From like what it was,
Yeah.
that there's no reason to have. It really gets me sad. There was a video going around. There's like, I guess there's some fight in a tournament, parents fight, you know what
Yes.
I mean? So that
Yeah.
kind of
It's
stuff, I'm like,
terrible.
dude, that is not especially, I'm saying like now at this 2024, to be able to see it, like, really, like, man, we've came a long way, like we definitely don't want to see that.
Yeah. I see the world in sort of a very black and white way where I feel like it should be manners. You're not in your own house. So you should show respect to other people. Like this, like the Arizona Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu League. That is a business. I'm in someone's business. I should treat his business with respect because I'm a consumer. I am a client right now. Why am I gonna, freak out or have some meltdown? And I know some parents who have. I know some people who have had like meltdowns at tournaments, and it's like, man, like this is not the right thing to do. It's just because you're a man, You should be a man in this situation and do the right thing. And that's how I feel. And yeah, you're right. The sport has come a very, very long way. You know, it's funny. I was one of those guys that just assumed, you know, I'm a kid, I guess I would say. I was like, everybody in Brazil must do Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. I feel so sad that as an American, I am, and maybe this is American culture. I have no idea how big soccer is, or sorry,
Mhm.
football. I had no clue. When I went to Sao Paulo and I tried to look for baby clothes for my son, everything was soccer uniforms. And I'm like, this is crazy. And then I thought about it. I was like, oh my gosh, this is my fault that this is crazy. This is America. This doesn't care about soccer. You know, we call it
Yeah.
soccer. Like, why do we call it soccer? It's football. You know, and I just think about this and I was like, wow, because Andre, you know, loves soccer as well. He likes the Fortaleza team, and he has all these soccer jerseys, and I'm just like, one time I asked him, I'm like, what is so big about football? He's like, Jake, over 1 billion people watch the World Cup, and only America watches the Super Bowl, and I was like, that's a crazy metric for me to think. I could never even wrap my head around it, you know? And so when I went to Brazil, I had that wake up moment where I was like, I think as an American, I am just born into being uncultured. Because I was one of those people that just thought, you know, everybody in Brazil must do jujitsu. I didn't even know how big capoeira was. And that capoeira is a big martial art in Brazil as well, isn't it?
Mhm, yeah, yeah.
That's like
Mhm.
crazy. I have no idea. I had no idea.
So if you, I mean, you started jujitsu as a child, but for people who are listening, we have a lot of, I love when I see masters get involved. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like people over 30, because sometimes they feel like they've done some sport in high school and they feel like, oh no, I'm too old. Or we're like, wait, it ain't like that. You know what I
Yeah.
mean? Uh, but what kind of like piece of advice would you give to someone that not just training, but like once you get involved with competition, and I'm not even saying high level.
Mm-hmm.
It's just for people like, man, I want to test it out and do some tournaments. What comes to your mind?
Just do it. Just do it once. Don't put because here's the thing. I also live my life by a biblical principle. Um, Allow the little children to come to me and forbid them not, for of such is the kingdom of heaven. So what I learned from that is children don't put up walls. If I tell a kid, hey, you want to compete in this tournament? They're like, yeah. You know, kids rarely don't want to compete. And you probably have seen this
Mm-hmm.
as well with teaching children. They're excited for the opportunity because they don't have this wall and they're not jaded. They're not like, oh, I might get embarrassed or I might lose or I might this and that and the other. They just go out and do it. And so my advice is if you want to really experience what jujitsu really does, and which is return you to childhood in a way, it returns you to a purity of learning where you're constantly playing, you're making relationships, you're breaking down barriers, you're invited into a community that is way deeper than other communities for different reasons. Um, if you really want to dive into that, you have to be willing to cross the bridge of fear. Just do it. We have at our academy, we have a man named Brian McCaffrey. He is 65 years old. He's beaten cancer twice. He's currently in the hospital for a different reason, so our love goes out to him. But he's a purple belt, and he started when he was 62. And he actually, what's funny is he got into it because Andre went to a bar and he was like, "Hey, what do you do?" And Andre's like, "I teach jiu-jitsu." There was two guys. There was a 38-year-old dude, and there was Brian. The 38-year-old dude said, "I'm too old for that." And Brian came in that Monday and never stopped coming. And
Nice.
so you're not too old. You're not too out of shape. You're not too unskilled because those are all different ways of kind of burying what might really be the thing. And I don't know what that is. You might actually have a better idea what that is, Gustavo, because you're more well versed in that field. But just try it. Go and don't let your fear conquer you because it does so many people. You know, fear is the number one thing that stops you from experiencing the next amazing thing. And so jiu-jitsu is beautiful and competition's beautiful because you get to go and test yourself and test your skills against unknown stimulus. You don't even know who this person is. You have no idea.
Mm-hmm.
You get to test how good your jiu-jitsu is against somebody that, man, you have no idea what they're going to do to you. And I think that's all. I think that's really, really beautiful because win or lose, you get a great result out of it. You either learn a lot or you validate your training. And that's a beautiful thing. So I would encourage everybody strongly to give competition at least one try. At least one try.
Absolutely. Now, I want to hear what is one of the best piece of advice that you ever received. And when I talk about, it doesn't have to be just jujitsu. You know what I mean? Just something that sometimes it could be from our parents. You know what I mean? It could be, but just something that stick with you, just to give you some time for you to think. I always like to say one of the best that I got is from my mom, that she said, you know, sometimes in life we need to do a couple steps back in order to move forward again. You know, there are moments that we need to like, and I witnessed in her journey moments that we had to like take a step back and then to start moving again. So anything that comes to your mind.
Oh man, that is a very profound question. Um, one time a long time ago, I believe it was Andre or it was just some black belt. They told me that I was nervous, I was really scared, and Andre and again I don't remember who, but he told me you are nervous and stressed out to compete in a game that 1% of the world cares about for a medal that costs $5 to make. And then I
Mhm.
realized, oh my gosh, like this is, it is a big deal for the sake of exactly what it is, which is just a competition that 1% of the world cares about. Um, but it was still, there's way more scary things that you could be doing right now.
No
This is
kidding.
something you do every single day. You like this. Remember why you actually did it in the first place. And if competition is so much more important than jujitsu itself, you're gonna have a hard time loving the sport because it should be about jujitsu. It should be about loving what you do, and competition is just a thing you do because you love jujitsu. So I think that was one of the biggest pieces of advice that I was given, was to remember that this is a game. You're playing a game, and it's fake.
Mhm.
It's a fake game.
Mhm.
Like
Yeah.
in the street, somebody has an arm bar, they're gonna break your arm, and they might kill you. Like that's the street. If somebody chokes me out unconscious in the street, I'm not gonna tap and they let go. We are in a sport when we're on the mat. It's fake. You have nothing to be scared of. You might get injured, sure, but you're in a controlled environment. The person's not trying to kill you.
Mhm. And
That was one piece of
also,
profound advice, I think.
what is one book that has made a big impact on you at some moment in your life? Doesn't matter. And it could be any topic. It
Yeah.
doesn't matter really the topic, but something that are like, man, when I read this book at this specific time, it really helped me, and why.
Yeah. Wow. Man, you're asking amazing questions, by the way, because I've read a lot of books. Of course, the Holy Bible is the book I base my entire life around. But so as to, answer the question with more of a book that is a little more readily available, I think I have it on my bookshelf back there. It's called Wild at Heart. So Wild at Heart is a book about, because I believe that a lot of my struggles with jujitsu competition and a lot of my struggles with just manhood in general was because I didn't understand, based on the way I was raised and some of the mistakes that perhaps my dad or like for instance, when I was 6 years old, my dad and my biological mother would get divorced. And in a landmark case, the judge had never given a husband full custody. He gave my dad full custody of me and my brother Ed. And that is a moment that, as I mean, a lot of children, divorce it's a scar. It's a big thing because mom and dad are no longer together. And I didn't have the faculties at the time to process it. I was 6, but it still weighed on me because I didn't talk to my biological mom for 14 years. I never
Wow.
said a word to her. And that was, it wasn't until I started walking with the Lord that he revealed to me that I needed to forgive her, because how could I expect to be forgiven if I don't forgive her? And I read this book, Wild at Heart, and it's by John Eldridge. And it is a book essentially about uncovering the reasons why men struggle to feel like men, and getting real with like, no, you need to admit where the root is. You need to search and be willing to take the root and pull it and get it out of there and forgive who you need to forgive. Work hard because here's why, and make sure that you understand this so that you don't raise children to make the same mistakes that you feel like making. because of how, the things that happened to you. And it drastically changed my life. It's actually, I met my wife right after I finished the book. Or I think I had finished it, or I was about to finish it for the first time reading it through. That book dramatically affected me. It was a very, very profound book.
Nice. I want to check it out. So, for everyone listening, you're getting close to the end of the interview, and I want to ask you what's going on, what you're currently excited about, what it's coming up. I know that you said there's something that's coming up exciting that you cannot share, but besides that, you talk about possibly competing again. That's exciting.
Yeah, I wish I could share it, by the way. I'm just waiting for them to post it. Like I said, I'm going to send you a text as soon as I can. So I'm getting back in shape. I consulted with the person who was my, at the start of my purple belt, brown belt career. I was working with a man named Jason Kamens, who is the strength coach of Ryan Bader and CB Dalloway and some of the UFC fighters. Ryan Bader's Bellator heavyweight champion, and he works with them. Jason is an amazing coach. I started working with him again. I'm trying to roll every class that I can, get myself back in shape, do cardio, take care of my diet. I gained a lot of weight when I got married and had a baby. I gained 30 pounds, Gustavo. I was competing medium heavyweight when I was a black belt. I'm 215 pounds right now. And I don't look bad. It's just, gosh, I gained a lot of weight. And so now I'm dealing with that. Like how do I grapple as a heavier person? And do I lose all the weight? I don't know. I don't know if I can lose all the weight, because it's also like I did get more muscle. I was lifting as well. So I am planning on competing again. I want to take some super fights. I do want to compete in some tournaments as well. The only problem is I travel all the time. What's coming up? Some months I don't know. And then I all of a sudden have a full month. Like the month of June, in May, I didn't know how many shows I had. And then in June or end of May, I found out, okay, here's 3 shows I'm going to do in June. Sometimes this industry is, the promoters let people know last second what the plan is. And that is, wow, that is frustrating, but I'm thankful regardless. So I'll be commentating. Lights Out Extreme Fighting is by Sean Merriman. That's been growing in the Southwest United States. He's got so many amazing plans, and for me to be the play-by-play commentator of that event is awesome. There's an event in Riyadh, Saudi Arabia that I might go to. I'm not sure. Again, they might let me know. I think Gabriel Souza and Fabricio Andre is the main event there, so that would be a show that I might potentially do. And then ADCC Worlds 2024 T-Mobile Arena. I'll be the play-by-play commentator for that as well. So endless work. I'm always working. I always have shows that I can do, and I'm really growing in that arena. But I do want to compete again. I can only commentate so much jiu-jitsu before I feel like, gosh, I just want to compete again at least once or twice. I want to get out there every now and again. So I'm making the effort to do that.
Yeah, dude, you're still so young, dude. 26, Jesus. Yeah.
Hey,
so I still got a few,
yes.
Pretty soon Masters knocking on the door.
Isn't that crazy? So you've known me and you've seen me compete since I was 12 years old. I am going to be, I'm eligible for Masters in 2 years. Masters 1. That's crazy. Cause I'm 20 by the IBJJF standard. I'm 27 this year, actually. Cause December. So December, and then next year's 28, and then 29 turning 30. It's like, oh my gosh, where did the time go?
I know, dude. When I look, I remember when like the Meow Brothers too, like became Masters. Of like, what? Like, what do you mean Masters? Yeah.
It's insane. Or like, even like all the competitors like Kynan Duarch. I remember seeing Kynan Duarch win like Juvenile Blue, or like Levi. We're all almost 30 now. The next generation. I mean, Keenan Cornelius I think he's like late 30s now, or he's like mid 30s, late 30s. And he was just doing things, it feels like.
That's crazy. And the thing with the Masters too, I was talking with someone this weekend. It's funny, like sometimes we may have like, I don't know, older gentlemen that just, it's Master 3 and just got their black belts and train like 3 times a week and then sign up for a tournament. Your first match is Cyborg. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
That's a rough day. You know what I mean?
He doesn't really count. Cyborg is not a okay, no, I'm mistaken.
But he does compete as Master 3 when he does, the Masters and stuff,
When he does the Masters 3, but he can also go to ADCC and do a lot of, I've seen him really do well against like Lucas Barbosa. I want to correct myself real quick before Keenan sees this and thinks that he's born in 92. So that's not late 30s yet.
Getting close to mid.
getting close to mid, but I don't want to say late 30s because then he'll message me and be like, "Hey man, I'm not in my late 30s." You know, I don't want to do that to him. I was born in
No worries.
1997, so the first world championship.
Wow.
Yeah, I know. I was born in 1997. Isn't that crazy? It's 2024.
Damn.
Yeah.
That makes me feel very old. So this year I'm officially turning 50, man. Next year I'm Master 5. That's wild.
Wow. Didn't
Yeah.
you just returned to competition, didn't you? Didn't you just
Yeah.
compete?
Yeah, I was in Jersey this weekend.
That is really cool.
Yeah, so
Congratulations.
yeah, thank you. Just a lot of after 5 major injuries and 2
Mhm.
surgeries, and just so just to be back on that, that's a win itself, to be
Mhm.
honest. No, and doing other things that I'm always doing stuff, so other priorities.
Mhm.
But I like to say too that competition is like an itch, like, is it itching, you scratching, you're not itching, you don't scratch it, you're not going to be scratching
Yep.
something that is not there. So as a competitor, sometimes you feel that little like, man, I'm really getting that itch, I want to do. And sometimes you don't feel like it, and so be it. Yeah,
It's
you're
me
getting
right
that
now.
itch,
I'm getting
starting
the
getting, yeah,
itch. Took a couple
starting,
years. Took a couple years.
yeah.
I needed the time off though. I really did. I wanted to start a family. I wanted to get married. Like I felt that itch was not an itch. It was a groaning. Like that was
Mm-hmm.
like I wanted it. I knew deep in my soul what I really wanted was to be a husband and a father. Um, but the itch was dead. And now I have this beautiful life and this growth in career that it's like almost like competition is something I can actually do for fun because I already have my career. You know what I mean? I already
Mm-hmm.
have my
Absolutely.
broadcasting career. I want to compete so that I can. And so I can be like, ah, cool. Let's go out there and like, let's actually have fun and let's go out there. Let's win some matches because I believe I can.
Mm-hmm. And one time, I don't know if you remember one of the Metamores that Jeff Glover was commentating, and then he just like jumped in. Do you remember that?
People have
It's
been
like
telling me
that.
to do that for the
Yeah,
last like 5 Who's Number Ones. They're like, you
that
got to
that
do
was
it.
that was gangster, because he was like, people like, oh, we have a guest one, a surprise competitor, and he's like, oh, me, oh, and then he comes in. That is gangster, and I tell you
Mhm.
what, that says a lot about his mindset. You know what I
Mhm.
mean? For it to be able to be like that, like, yeah, just gonna jump in here and compete against Barry Yoshida. You know what I mean?
Yep.
That's awesome. That's, like, and see how relaxed he was too. I'm a fan of his jujitsu, of how like authentic he is, the way he, things the way he does, and how comfortable he is on a mat. It's pretty
Mhm.
cool to see.
I love it. And I told Flo, I'll do it. I told him, and I make no reservations about it. Whatever show wants to do that shtick or that gimmick, I will do it because I've actually, a lot of people don't know this. Almost every event, I bring gear just in case somebody pulls out,
Last
gets
minute.
sick, gets injured. I've told everybody, listen, I'll fight. And it almost happened. There was the IBJJF Absolute Grand Prix for the females, and Felipe Andrew versus Roosevelt Souza was the co-main because the final is going to be whoever wins the female Grand Prix. And Roosevelt was really late, and they were like, "Jake, do you have your gi?" And I was like, "I'll go do it right now." I was so excited because I was like, "I finally get to do it." And then they were like, "Oh, Roosevelt's here," and I was honestly really disappointed because I was like, "Man, that would have been so cool. Everybody would have loved it." Like
One
I
day
step in to save the
it
show.
will happen. It will happen at some point. It will be
We'll
cool.
see. I mean, I'm not advocating for fighters to be
Yeah.
late. Please be professionals. But in
Yeah.
the event that you don't,
Emergency can
I
happen
got
or
you.
whatever.
Yes, yeah. I've
All right.
I've lobbied for it on numerous occasions.
Cool. Jake, thank you so much, man. I appreciate it. Like I said, I've been watching your career, this whole time since you're a child. I've always been a super respectful kid and respectful adult. And it's awesome to see your growth and this new chapter in your life, as a family man, and pursuing a very like a niche, like there's not that many people doing what you're doing right
Mhm.
now. And especially with the expertise that you have, of like competing at a high level. There's not that many people doing that. So it will continue to opening a lot of doors for you. So man, the sky's the limit.
Thank you so much. That means a lot to hear from you. Like I told you at the beginning of the episode, uh, you know, I have loved competing in Arizona, and what you've done in this state is very special. And I think a lot of people may not give you your roses, or they may not give you the praise that you deserve. But I mean, I've always enjoyed it. I've always recommended people to go compete at it, and I will always recommend people to compete at it. You've always showed me respect as well. You've been immeasurably kind to me, and even when I was competing against all your competitors, it was always very respectful. And so I reciprocate that back to you, Gustavo, and I appreciate you having me on the podcast. It is a huge honor to be able to have this conversation with you. And I look forward to working with you more in the future.
Yes, sir. Thank you so much. Appreciate it. See you guys later. Us.
Moose.